In this question, we are being asked to solve for x. I can tell that this is a trigonometry problem because this diagram includes measurements for both sides and for angles. For example, this side right here with the 26 meters, that's a side. The variable x, that's a side of the triangle. But in contrast, this 38-degree measurement, that is an angle. When you have a triangle problem that involves both sides and angles, that's your indication that you'll want to use a trigonometry formula. When we're starting a trigonometry problem, the first thing that we need to do is we need to label our diagram. If there is no diagram given to you, then make sure that you draw that triangle, label it with the measurements, and that way you can more easily label the sides. So the first two things to label are the right angle. Make sure that it's a right triangle because sine, cosine, and tangent only work for right triangles. Second, you'll want to label theta. Okay, theta is a Greek letter, and theta needs to go in one of the acute corners of the triangle, and you can tell which one to pick by looking for the measurement. If you see the degrees, right, like this says 38 degrees, that's your indication that that's the corner for theta. Lastly, we need to label the three sides. Our three sides, we start with the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always the longest side of the triangle. This is often the easiest one to identify because visually it will appear the largest. Now, if it's too difficult to tell which side is the largest, then it will always be across the triangle from the right angle. The next side to label is the opposite side. The opposite side of the triangle is the side that's always across the triangle from theta. So that's why we need to label theta first. All right, so here is the opposite side, and then the final side is the adjacent. And the adjacent side is the last one that's left over. The word adjacent means next to, and the reason why we call this side the adjacent side is because the last one will always be right next to theta. Okay, notice how the blue side and the 38 degrees are right there side by side. Now, the reason why we start every single trigonometry problem with labeling is because now we can identify which of the three formulas to actually choose. We have three options. We have sine, we have cosine, and we have tangent. And this right here is a memory trick. You might have heard of the phrase sohcahtoa. Right? If you can remember the word sohcahtoa, it can help you remember all three formulas without actually having to memorize them. So when we're looking through our options, we need to figure out which formula to pick based on which two sides are the ones that are relevant. When we're comparing all three sides here, notice that two of them have measurements. The hypotenuse has a measurement of 26, and the opposite has a measurement of x. The third side, the adjacent, is completely blank, which means we don't actually need to focus on that side at all. And so when we're choosing the formula, we need to pick the formula that uses h for hypotenuse and o for opposite. So scan through all three options, and I notice that it's the first one right here that uses the o for opposite and the h for hypotenuse. The letter S stands for sine, so we're going to be using the sine formula. In this problem, we're going to be using the normal sine formula rather than the inverse sine formula. And I know to use the normal sine formula because this question is asking me to solve for a side. When you're solving for a side of the triangle, we use the regular formulas. All right, so I'm going to write down the formula. We have theta in the parentheses, and then after the equal sign is the fraction. And the fraction follows the same pattern as sohcahtoa. So on the top, we need to have the opposite, and on the bottom of the fraction is the hypotenuse. All right. Now we need to fill in those three measurements into the proper places. So we have theta, the opposite, and hypotenuse. So I'm going to fill them all in. All right, let's see here. So sine stays the same. All right, I'm just filling out the structure. Theta is 38 degrees. And then on the top, the opposite, let's see, the opposite is our variable x. And then on the bottom is the hypotenuse, which is the 26 meters. And now we have our formula filled out. This can be typed into the calculator. Some of you may know quick tricks on how to type that into the calculator directly. I'm going to show a little bit of work here. So when we're solving, remember solving for x, the idea to solve is to get x by itself. And we can get x by itself by cross multiplying. If we turn both sides into fractions, we can easily cross multiply this together. So on one of the diagonals, we have, let's see, we have 1 times x on one of the diagonals, right? This one right here. And then the second diagonal, we have 26 times the sine. So we have 26 multiplied by sine of, and then the 38 is connected to the sine. So those move together. And then we put an equal sign in the middle, right? Just like before, equals is in the middle. And this gets x by itself, right? Because 1 times x is just x, and the rest of it can be typed into the calculator. If you are aware of the trick that allows you to avoid the cross multiplication, some of you may know the trick that if you have a variable on the top of the fraction, that you're going to end up multiplying in the calculator. And that's a pattern that stays true for all trigonometry problems. Right, at this point, we need to bring up our calculator so that way we can actually type in this 26 times sine 38. To do that, we need to make sure that our calculator is in degree mode. And so on a TI-83 or TI-84 calculator, you can click the mode button to make sure that it is in degree mode. See where it's highlighted there. To get out of the mode menu, you click clear and you'll get brought back to the home screen. So let's type in 26 and then multiply by sine of 38. So the sine button is in the middle of the calculator keypad. We have sine, cosine, and tangent. And we can type in 38. And when we hit enter, it will tell us the result for x. All right, so we have that x is, and let me bring that back up onto the screen real quick. We have 16 point, and let's round to the hundredths, so that means we need to have 16.01. Right, 16.01, and since we're solving for a side measurement, these sides are in meters, so that's what I'm going to use as my units. That's all for today. Like and subscribe.